All right, welcome to our next set of notes. I just wanted to give you a heads up on our final exam because it will come up kind of quick. This time you're going to have 2 hours to take the exam because it is a comprehensive final covering all the first and second sections, including this third section that we're going to start today and continue next week. So again, it is comprehensive, so make sure you organize your notes really, really well. And our discussion project starts this week. Make sure you check the instructions on e-learning in order to get all the points for the discussion. If you have any questions, you can always email me. All right, we're going to continue with television notes, but we're going to move into cable television. Now, cable television, obviously, we're all familiar with that. Most of us have cable TVs in our home or in our apartments or dorms. But we also have other methods of receiving television via DirecTV, Dish Network, and some other things, and we'll talk about that later in the other set of notes coming up next week. But cable television primarily, if you see the abbreviation for cable television, it's CATV. And CATV stands for Community Antenna Television. So if you ever see that on cable television truck going down the side of the road and you wonder what that is, CATV stands for Community Antenna Television, all right? Now, believe it or not, Community Antenna Television was not created to bring us HBO and ESPN and CNN and MSNBC and Fox and all that good stuff. It was actually created a long, long time ago, roughly about 1948, in a city called Mahoney City, and it was in the mountains of Pennsylvania. And believe it or not, it was just a mom-and-pop TV store that basically had our TV repair shop. And they had some issues in the mountains of Pennsylvania. We had a lot of people living up there, and they couldn't get reception over the airwaves on their antenna. So John and Margaret Walson created this system whereby they mounted an antenna on top of an aerial up on top of the highest mountain top in their area, and basically rebroadcasted the TV signals to people living in the homes up in the mountains. And so it was a means to an end to create television. And if these people in the mountains could get TV reception, then possibly they'd come back and buy TVs from their company called the Service Electric Company, which did a lot of repairs on electrical appliances, but they also sold TV sets. So John and Margaret's theory was if we can get people TV, they might buy the TV sets from us, and it works. So just keep that in mind when you're going through your notes that cable TV was basically a solution of poor reception for TV in areas that couldn't get it. And then that expanded across the country. Once John and Margaret's cable TV method was proven that it would work, other people around the country started adopting their technologies, advancing on the technology of cable TV and so forth. Now, believe it or not, the Walsons were really the first cable system to distribute paid television programming, and this happened in the early 70s. And the first paid television program that they started selling to their cable subscribers was HBO. We'll talk about HBO here in a few minutes and where it began and so forth. As cable started to expand across the country, like I said, the cable operators, and when we talk about cable operators are the owners of the cable systems around the country and in the different cities. And what they found out was that the cable that carried the television signal could actually carry more TV channels than you could over the airwave. If you were in a highly populated area like New York, Chicago, and LA, you got 6, maybe 8 channels, mid to late 1950s. But what cable operators found out is they could carry up to 12 channels in the beginning of cable television, and as the cable industry technology progressed, we could do more than that. So it was kind of a neat caveat that they found that they could do, and so they had a nice little niche that they started carving in to the business side of TV, that they could actually provide more channels than what over-the-air broadcast could provide. Obviously, you had to buy the cable systems, and so there was a fee for that versus just put an antenna on your house. But that was one of the things that the cable operators found out. Again, cable systems were basically created as a solution to poor TV reception, so just kind of keep that in your notes. By 1950, cable systems operated in about 70 communities around the United States, which equated to about 14,000 homes. And we'll talk about more statistics here coming up here in a few minutes. When we do the statistics in the notes, for your notes, underline the date and the number of homes in the communities and things like that. So just kind of highlight those, whatever you need to do. So by 1950, cable systems operated in about 70 communities, which equated to about 14,000 homes in the United States. And we're going to talk strictly the United States and all of these statistics coming up. By 1998, almost 11,000 systems were in place around the United States, and we had about 65 million homes that were subscribed to cable TV. Just keep somewhere in your notes that we're talking about cable TV, community antenna television, and not direct TV at this point. This is strictly cable TV, and it's not internet TV. That's not even close to becoming fruition yet, but just kind of keep that in mind. We're strictly talking about community antenna television. Now, as cable TV started to grow and do more things and had more channels and so forth, we see the government step in and start regulating some of the cable industries. Now, by 72, cable TV was up to about 100 markets. And so what the FCC ruled for cable TV systems in each community is that they needed to provide at least one television channel set aside for public. It could be educational, it could even be a government channel. So in each city, so in this case by 1972 we had 100 TV markets around the country. Every one of these markets, every one of these cable systems had to provide the local public entity one channel so they could broadcast public shows on there, or educational or government channels. That still exists today. You'll see it's a local community antenna station. Anybody from the community can go in and do their own TV show if you want to. There are some rules and regulations as far as what can be shown on it. Now, when we talk about one public TV station, this isn't PBS. The other thing that the FCC mandated, they had something called the must carry rule. And basically, this mandated that every cable company carry various local and public television stations within the cable provider service area. It began at 60 miles and later switched down to about a 15-mile radius. But basically what this meant for cable operators across the country is that they could provide as many channels to the cable subscribers as they wanted to, but they had to carry the local TV stations in their market. And that included public broadcasting, and it included all the network stations. So in the beginnings, you basically had three networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and then your PBS station if you had one in the market. And pretty much every major market had a public broadcasting station. And so you had 4 channels that were basically covered under this must-carry rule. This was basically to ensure that the local TV stations didn't lose market share, because in theory back then, you didn't have to watch local TV stations. You could just watch your cable systems, which would be HBO or anything else that would come on, and later it would be ESPN and CNN and those things. So the FCC kind of foresaw a problem that the local TV stations could be run out of business, and so they created this must-carry rule, basically to help the local TV stations stay in business as far as cable TV was concerned. We also saw another rule that happened in 1992. It was called the Communications Act of 1992, and basically it allowed the cable TV systems to drop redundant carriage of signals that were within the service area. So what this basically means is if 2 of those stations aired the exact same program at the exact same time, then they could turn off that signal during that time. And I'll give you a perfect example. Channel 17 here in Grand Rapids at 7 showed 2.5 Men. There was another cable TV station that also aired 2.5 Men. I forget what it was at the top of my head. I think it might have been Channel 3. There were 2 local TV stations that carried 2.5 Men at the exact same time. And so what Comcast and Charter were allowed to do was during that 7 o'clock time zone was to shut one of the stations off on their cable systems and put up something else. So that was one of the things that was helpful. I know in the West Michigan market at one time we had Channel 50 out of Detroit, which for me growing up in Detroit was kind of fun to watch Channel 50 over here. But they ended up showing a lot of television programs that Channel 17 was showing. So eventually Comcast dropped Channel 50 altogether. Now they didn't have to carry Channel 50, they just did. But because they were showing identical programs, they eventually dropped Channel 50, which kind of stunk back then because I think the Red Wings were on Channel 50 at some point. So, but anyways, just remember the Communications Act of 1992 allowed cable systems to drop TV stations that had duplicate programming. But they were only allowed to do that during the time frame in a day where the programming happened to be duplicated. If it wasn't duplicated, then they had to turn them back on. Cable TV saw a pretty good explosion by 1985. We have 50% of the homes in the United States wired for cable, which was a pretty significant jump between 1970 and 1985. One of the things that we saw happen too was by 1997, basic cable channels captured a larger primetime audience than any of the broadcast networks combined. So that's a huge, huge number by 1997. So all of a sudden, up until 1997, we always turned the TV on, you watched one of the three basic networks, ABC, CBS, or NBC. But by 1997, or in 1997, it was the first year that we saw that cable TV channels, other than the three primetime networks, captured a larger audience than the three networks. So that was, in some cases, some people thought that was the downfall of network TV. But it was a big shift in the viewing habits. By the late 1990s, early 2000s, we see that we have over 200 plus channels, and we still see little competition within the communities around the country for cable TV. There is a little known rule that every community has in place where they can pick what cable provider will provide their communities with cable TV, and they sign a deal, a contract that no other cable system can come into that market. Now, you will see, like in Grand Rapids, and I think probably Kalamazoo has the same thing, you might have Comcast and Charter both in an area, but both Comcast and Charter split the community up into regions. And so there's barely a crossover. And the only place I've ever seen this is in Detroit, where you do have a choice in a community to get two different cable systems, but it's very limited. Probably Chicago, New York, and LA have that too. But in West Michigan and Kalamazoo, even though we have two cable systems, depending on where you live, you can only get one. And so there is little competition, unfortunately, and so the price is where it is. But in relationship to price, one of the things that the FCC did regulate, and still does, is the basic cable rates. So the basic channels, so when you buy your cable programming from Comcast or Charter, you'll see they have all these different breakdowns. The cheapest rate on there is called the basic rate, and the FCC regulates that basic rate only. After that, sky is the limit, and then that's where Comcast and Charter basically hose us on the rest of the programming and their price. But just remember for your notes, the FCC regulates only the basic rates for cable television. Now, where does cable TV get their revenue from? Obviously, if you think about it, it's the monthly subscriptions from basic service and everything else. They also sell local TV ads, and they produce their local ads, and they can actually run these local TV ads within the cable program themselves. They're offered different time slots within the local programming or on the cable programming for the local cable provider to reinsert or to insert their local TV ads. So they can go out and sell local ad time. It's not as expensive as, let's say, Channel 3 would be to advertise. So a lot of mom and pop shops that are just starting to get into TV advertising, they'll start buying cable ads first because they're quite a bit less than they would be if you went directly to like Channel 3 or Channel 8 and so forth. And they'll start out doing that, and then they'll move up. I work with a lot of clients that have a lot of money, and they buy local TV stations as well as local cable. So they want to cover the entire market, TV market, and they don't want to miss anybody, so they buy everything. Pay-per-view programming obviously is another big revenue stream for local cable TV. And now, of course, internet and telephone is another big revenue for cable TV as well too. Home box office, we talked about that in a few slides ago. So home box office, which is HBO, started locally in 1972. Basically, they are a subsidiary of Time Inc. HBO became the first viable pay cable channel by 1978. So, and what I mean by that, they were the first ones to offer just movies only. Prior to that, we had cable TV systems rebroadcasting local TV stations, but HBO became the first viable pay cable channel by 78. We see the first cable kids show on HBO, and it was called Fraggle Rock. Fraggle Rock aired between 1983 and 1987. Most of you guys probably don't remember that. Maybe a couple of you in the class do, but I watched it. It was kind of an odd show, but just for your notes, the first kids show on HBO was called Fraggle Rock. Another big cable network programming was MTV, music television, started by what they called their campaign is I Want My MTV. If you see any old YouTube clips of that, you can see the man on the moon, and they changed the flag and all that kind of good stuff. Music television, MTV, was launched August 1st, 1981 in New York City. Please underline those dates. Keep that in mind, as well as the HBO dates. ESPN, they were launched in 1979. I was not in college in 1979, but I did work for these guys. September 1st is a major important date to remember. September 1st, 1980, ESPN began 24-hour programming of sports, and that was the first time that's ever happened. And one of the things that they had happen was, because of the 24-hour programming, they were scrambling to try to figure out what to broadcast during the 24 hours. So they would do every sport imaginable. They would go out and film and either do live TV or tape and rerun it. Division II, Division III sports. But they were the first sports network to begin 24-hour programming back on September 1st of 1980. By 1982, ESPN had 25 million subscribers. And you might go, wait a minute, how does ESPN get subscribers if they're not a cable system? And that's a good question. I have a lot of people ask me that. Cable TV has to purchase ESPN, they have to purchase HBO, they have to purchase MTV, and they have to pay ESPN to run their programming. So you as a cable subscription in the basic cable probably won't get ESPN or doesn't get all the other ESPN channels, but as you add on to your cable system packages, now you start paying for ESPN and for some of the other things, and HBO obviously is a major moneymaker. And so even though you may not know that you're an ESPN subscriber, if you get ESPN, you're included in the amount of subscribers that ESPN has. ESPN created a new television genre called sports news. We never really had sports news other than maybe about a 3-minute segment on our local news station. But now ESPN actually created a show called SportsCenter, and it's still around today. In 1984, ABC purchased ESPN for quite a bit of money, and it's really spun that network off into a really, really lucrative business. In 1987, they got involved in the NFL contracts, so they purchased a portion of the NFL contracts. 1990s saw the first national network to hire women as sports anchor. So ESPN in the 1990s was the first network to hire a woman as a sports anchor, and that was a huge turn of events in a positive way for women on TV. By 2007, ESPN saw 92.3 million subscribers, and that equaled CNN subscription rates, which was a huge accomplishment for ESPN. I'm going to go back to the FCC and some of the things they did with cable TV. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 was basically the first significant, and by significant I mean a major overhaul of the communications law in more than 60 years. Basically, the Telecommunications Act of 1996 basically rewrote and adjusted everything that was written in the 1934 Act. And this was an act that was signed by President Clinton. It was also the first time that we see the internet included in any kind of telecommunications law. The act also allowed for media cross-ownership, so now what we see is one owner can own as many radio and TV and newspapers as well as cable systems as they want. Prior to this, if you remember from your notes from Com256, or if you haven't had Com256 and you're going to have it, you'll get this. But the FCC mandated what was called the Rule of Sevens, where you could only own 7 radio and TV newspaper in any given market. And so the Telecommunications Act of 1996 basically eliminated that. They allowed for cross-ownership. Basically, it was a goal to deregulate broadcasting and the telecommunications market. They wanted the government out of that business. They wanted the customers, the consumers, the business models to just take off and see how far it went. For the most part, it worked out really well. I really believe if the cable industry doesn't watch themselves that we might see some regulation go back into play, but I don't think that'll happen. But we'll just kind of see as things play out over the next 15 to 20 years with that. This act also forced local telephone companies to share their lines with their competitors at regulated rates. Now, at the beginning, nobody knew what the heck this was all about, but now that we see what happened, we see not only do we see an emergence of cable systems, more cable systems coming into play, but now we see more telephone companies coming into play. It's not just Ma Bell telephone company. Now we see local businesses getting into the telephone company. We see AT&T getting into the cable industry. So we see this cross-sharing of businesses, if you will, kind of being spurred from this act. Title V of this act was the Communications Decency Act, which basically aimed to regulate internet indecency and obscenity. We had a lot of porn on the internet. We still do, obviously. But what was interesting about this Title V of this act is that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was a violation of the First Amendment, which I think was very, very interesting. And if you read the case study, it'll explain to you why that ruling is such that it includes the internet but not TV. So we still have a pretty strong, although you wouldn't see it by today's television, we have a pretty good strong Decency and Obscenity Act for television and radio, although those strings are becoming loose and loose every day. But we don't for the internet. And so that was one of the things that happened with Title V. Pricing, and here's some statistics. Again, just write these down for your notes. You're going to need to know them since it's open book, open note. All this stuff here is basically fair game for the exam. Between 85 and 92, we saw cable rates raise 10 to 20% each year. So we see a big thing happen as far as rates. Now, but remember, basic service, we see it raise about from $10 to about $20. That basic service rate was still and still is regulated by the FCC. So the other cable rates, the top tier services really took off, but the basic rates didn't raise a ton, but they did raise a little bit. Between 2002 and 2007, expanded basic prices rose 40%. And if you look at the inflation rate between 2002 and 2007, it only rose 12%. So you can see that if the FCC hadn't come in and put a cap on the amount that they could raise for basic service, we would have seen every service probably raise 40% and more by now. A couple things that also changed, and one of the reasons they expanded the prices is they had to cover the cost for expanding technology. And one of the things that we saw is we went from coaxial cable to fiber cable, and that's just a picture up in the upper left there of what coaxial cable looks like. It's any kind of the cable that comes in your house, and it's wired through your house more than likely. But the outside lines running to the home, back to the cable head end, most of them now are fiber optic cables. And we see the move from coaxial cable to fiber cable, not inside the house, but up to the house outside. Around 1992, we started seeing that, and it's, for the most part, every cable system today has fiber in place somewhere or another. And the big thing is the telephone companies, AT&T for example, that are offering cable TV, that's all fiber as well. By 1999, 75% of homes are wired for cable. Again, this is the US. So we see a big, almost 100%, 75% there by 1999. By 2011, it's 93% of houses are wired, but this statistic is a little skewed because by 2011, a majority of these homes or the additional homes were wired due to the internet service that the cable industry is now providing. We probably wouldn't have seen that big of a jump between 99 and 2011 if it wasn't for the internet being provided by cable systems. We also see that by 2011, cable and streaming shows are now recognized at the Emmy Awards. Early 1990 or late 1990s, early 2000s, we saw edgier programming like The Sopranos. I don't know if you've ever seen that, and we see more of it today, obviously. Mad Men was a cable program. It was the first cable series to win an Emmy Award for Outstanding Drama Series. So what we start seeing now, and now we really see it going into the Netflix type of programming, is we see other programs other than what's on network TV starting to be recognized for outstanding awards. And so Mad Men was the first cable series to win that award. By 2010, wired cable TV penetration of U.S. households hit a 21-year low, due primarily to the ability to receive programs via alternate systems like the internet and DirecTV and Dish Network. So what we're seeing here happen is we've seen a little bit of a major raise by 2011, but we're also seeing a decline in cable TV penetration. So what's confusing in your notes here is that second bullet point. It says 2011 we have 93% of homes are wired, up from 75% in 99. But that 93% of wired, a lot of those are not getting cable TV, they're just getting internet. I didn't want to write all this out, but the statistics show that cable TV from 1989 until present day, just for cable TV, is decreasing in subscription rates. The internet subscription rates is going up. Cable subscriptions peaked, like I said, at 101 million in 2011. About 5% of the U.S. cable subscribers canceled their subscriptions to rely solely on other TV delivery methods like Netflix or Hulu or DirecTV, and this is as of 2014. So even though 5% is not that much or not that great of detail, it's, so we probably went from 95% down to 90% if you're looking at statistics, and we go, well, that's not a big deal, but it's Netflix and Hulu and these other services are really gaining ground. They started out pretty strong, and then they saw a decrease, and now they're starting to gain strength again. So we'll probably see these numbers change drastically here in the next 10 to 15 years unless Netflix and these other services do something different again. But it all depends on what kind of programming Netflix and Hulu and these other services can get. Now, DirecTV and Dish Network are something else, and we'll talk about those here later. Cable television business sales are about $3 billion in 1980. Today it's about $94 billion. And again, remember that $94 billion today is the bulk of it is not in cable television. It's actually in telephone and internet service providers. Fourth quarter of 2010, wireless activates a record number, 635,000 smartphones. So this is an incredible number. By 2014, or by the end of 2010, the fourth quarter of 2010, we have 600,000 new wireless smartphones being activated. That's just a huge, huge number. And so now we have a new avenue to watch TV or streaming media, and now it's through on our smartphones. The wireless data revenue growth is at about 35% in 2012. This is wireless now. So this is all the things, this is another avenue that's kind of stripping away cable television subscription rates. The percentage of households with wireless only homes as of last year was about almost 36%. So that's a big, big number too. If you have wireless in your home, you're going to probably be able to stream TV through other ways and other methods other than cable TV. And just to show you, just kind of another little caveat that I wanted to show you with text messages with wireless phone or with smartphones. In the U.S. only, all right, we sent 2.27 trillion texts in 2012. I've been looking for latest statistics, and some of the statistics actually show us decreasing the number of text messages because of other programs and apps that we have on our phones that we can send messages through. But I thought this was interesting that 2.2 trillion texts were sent just in the U.S. alone in 2012. All right, cable versus DBS, and when I talk about DBS, that refers to direct broadcast satellite, which is Dish and DirecTV. Comcast is the largest cable subscriber in the United States with about 24 million subscriber households. Then we add Charter to that mix with about 17 million, and Charter just recently purchased Time Warner for $55.1 billion. So that was a huge acquisition for Charter. Then we come in with DirecTV, which is a DBS company for 21 million subscribers. We add Dish Network, which is a DBS company with 12.4 million subscribers. And then Netflix, which has 93.8 million subscribers as of 2016, is one of the largest streaming services. And now they're adding their original shows to their mix of offerings. So it's going to be interesting to see what they're doing. Their subscriber base has jumped incredibly over the last couple of years. All right, that'll do it for this set of notes. Have a good week.